What are some of the biggest ways that you see the traditional education system, I guess, failing our kids these days?
Yeah, great question. I mean, first thing, I feel like the traditional education system groups kids by their birth year, right? And to me, that's something that is so outdated, right? Any parent like yourself who has more than one child knows that even in the same environment, right? Same parents, same environment, two kids are so different than one another. Yet in the traditional school system, we place kids in these boxes based on their birth year, and we expect them all to grow at the exact same pace at the exact same time. And that's radically different than what actually happens in the real world, right? In the real world, success is not determined by your age. It's shaped by your skill set, what experiences you had, what is your mindset, how adaptable are you, how do you collaborate with others? So one thing that we felt really strongly about when we were building the Boundless education model is that we wanted to have multi-age classrooms where students are able to learn alongside others who are both older and younger than them, just like they would in real life. And to us, that's what encourages, leadership and empathy and more natural learning relationships and peer interaction. So I think that's one big thing is how kids are grouped. And then what you touched upon as well, right? Like this factory model treats kids like workers, right? There's bells, there's rigid schedules, everything's based on memorization, and you're not really encouraging courageous thinkers, you're creating these compliant citizens. So I think in this day and age, it's so important to build creativity, resilience, adaptability, and global awareness. And, I've seen firsthand with my own kids and so many kids that have had an experience like this, when you kind of transform, I'd say, like let go of that rigid structure and start to trust children's natural ability and desire to learn. That's when you start seeing real transformation, right? Then you see kids who are no longer asking, hey, is this going to be on the test? And they start asking, hey, how
Hmm.
can I make a difference? How can I add value? How can I add value to this world? And to me, that's the mindset that we want to be creating in kids, not just, factory workers.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think about it. My youngest was really afraid of going in the pool. And the swim instructor that we worked with, who I didn't work with my first, was really taking her time. And she was like, I get a lot of families who just want this, like, learn how to swim in 5 days thing. And she's like, she will learn the skills, but what I'm really curious and what I'm really interested in is creating a love of swimming and a confidence
Mm,
in swimming. And that's what I'm kind of thinking of when you're talking about this, is creating a love of learning, which is going to take them way farther in a world where jobs are getting created left, right, and center that didn't exist not even 2 years ago. Like, you have to create a learning lover who's going to love to learn new skills rather than teaching the exact skills that were needed 10 years ago, because they're not even teaching skills that are needed right now.
totally. Yeah.
And
Yeah.
another thing that I think of, and I'm looking at it from the lens of, the United States, but I think this is kind of a westernized schooling, I guess, standard. But the concept of standardized tests, I mean, I definitely grew up taking standardized tests, and they've kind of been the gold standard for measuring student success. And especially in the United States, kids are just looked at as like walking test scores. It's not even about how they're feeling, how they're doing. If they're anxious, it's just like, what's their test score and how does this benefit the school? Why do you think standardized testing might not be the best way at measuring that student success? And what would be your alternative if you could replace it with something else?
Yeah, I mean, I think learning should be adaptive, right? Not standardized. Like we said, there's no two kids that are the same. So why should their education be the same? Kids need to learn how to kind of take a problem and be able to break it down, digest it, and be these creative thinkers themselves rather than just rote memorization to be able to regurgitate on a test. Like, I think of myself back in the day, I kind of figured out how to beat the system, right? So I knew how to get 100 on the test, but there was zero retention on anything I learned. So I might have gotten 100 on the test, but you asked me 24 hours later anything that had to do with that test, I couldn't tell you, right? Because like you said, there was no love for learning. It was just memorizing to answer those questions and then moving on. So I think if we shift our learning to being more adaptive, to having fostering this love of learning and making it a lot more purposeful, I think that makes a really big difference as well, right? So why do we need to learn long division, right? Like long division is so boring and it's not, you have to learn it just to pass a test. But if you apply it to a real world problem, like the kids are working on a project and you're like, hey, in order to figure out how to solve poverty in, Ethiopia, we need to figure out how to divide the number of bananas that are available in this little village, and this is why we need to learn long division. You're adding purpose, you're adding meaning to learning a specific concept. And to me, that kind of hands-on experiential approach is what makes learning stick, right? That's what makes it sticky. You will never forget how to learn long division if you are applying it to a real world problem. You're adding meaning, you're adding purpose. That's when you feel like you're making a difference and you want to learn a certain concept. So I think the approach needs to really shift as well, as rather than just teaching concepts or theories, you need to add meaning and purpose to everything that's happening in a classroom.
Yeah, and you raise a really good point because the jobs that will be created for our children and the world that's created for our children is very much going to be tackling those big issues. That's just not some, random example that you're giving. So I feel like giving them kind of a front row view of what is going to be ahead too and what they're going to need the skills to be able to use that for